Commander Elena Rodriguez stood perfectly still on the command deck of the UES Defiance, her weathered hands clasped behind her back as she studied the tactical hologram floating before her. 50 massive alien vessels hung in Earth's upper atmosphere like metallic storm clouds, their hulls gleaming with an otherworldly luminescence that made her eyes water if she stared too long. 3 days. It had been exactly 3 days since humanity's most profound moment. First contact with an alien civilization. The initial euphoria had lasted approximately 14 minutes, until the aliens made their intentions crystal clear. "Ma'am, incoming transmission from the flagship," Lieutenant Thompson announced from his communications console, his young voice betraying the tension that gripped the entire bridge crew. "Same source as before." Rodriguez nodded curtly. "On screen, Lieutenant." The main display shimmered and resolved into the imposing figure that had haunted her nightmares for the past 72 hours. Ambassador Zethkar of the Hegemony Council stood nearly 3 meters tall, his 4 arms moving in precise, calculated gestures. His crystalline skin caught the light from his ship's internal systems, shifting through subtle hues of blue and silver. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute authority, each word enunciated with the precision of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "Primitive humans," Zethkar began, and Rodriguez felt every muscle in her body tense at the casual dismissal in those 2 words. "Your species has been thoroughly evaluated by our xenobiology specialists and strategic assessment teams. You possess rudimentary spaceflight capabilities, barely sufficient to reach your own moon. Your energy manipulation technology is laughably basic, equivalent to what our ancestors achieved 7 millennia ago. Your weapon systems rely on crude chemical propulsion and explosive compounds that our children study as historical curiosities." The alien paused, letting his words sink in. Rodriguez could hear the subtle shift in breathing patterns around the bridge as her crew absorbed the casual arrogance of their would-be conqueror. "The Hegemony Council, in its infinite wisdom and mercy, offers your species membership in our galactic confederation. You will serve as a client species, providing raw materials from your system's asteroid belt and planetary bodies. Your population will contribute labor for our industrial projects. In return for this honor, we will not implement the standard extinction protocols typically reserved for primitive worlds." The bridge fell into absolute silence. Rodriguez could hear the distant hum of the ship's life support systems, the soft beeping of monitoring equipment, even the rapid heartbeat of Ensign Martinez at the navigation station. She felt her jaw muscles clench involuntarily, a physical reaction to 23 years of military service that had taught her to recognize patronizing enemies when she encountered them. "And if we refuse this generous offer?" Rodriguez asked, keeping her voice level and professional despite the rage building in her chest. Zethkar's facial features shifted into what she supposed might be amusement among his species. "Refusal would be inadvisable, Commander Rodriguez. Your chemical rockets and kinetic projectile weapons pose no meaningful threat to our energy shield matrices and plasma discharge systems. Our conquest records document the successful subjugation of 47 species across this galactic arm. Each one initially demonstrated similar optimism regarding their chances of resistance." Rodriguez exchanged a meaningful glance with Major James Park, her tactical officer. Park was a 20-year veteran of the Orbital Defense Corps, a man who had survived 3 major asteroid mining conflicts and the brutal corporate wars of the outer system. His slight nod told her everything she needed to know. He had reached the same conclusion she had. Behind the aliens' overwhelming technological superiority and casual dismissal of human capabilities, behind the perfectly orchestrated show of force, lay something "Major Park," she said quietly, turning to face her tactical officer. "What's the current status on Project Railgun?" Park's eyes lit up with the fierce gleam she remembered from their days fighting corporate security forces in the asteroid belt. "Fully operational, ma'am. Dr. Harrison's team completed the final calibrations yesterday. The lunar installation is armed, loaded, and ready for your command. "300 kilometers beneath the lunar surface, in a facility that officially didn't exist, Dr. Michael Harrison made final adjustments to humanity's most carefully guarded secret. The Orbital Defense Initiative had been developing kinetic weapon systems in absolute secrecy for 37 years, but the arrival of the Hegemony fleet had transformed decades of theoretical research into humanity's last desperate gambit. Harrison wiped perspiration from his forehead as he stood before the massive magnetic acceleration chamber, a tunnel that stretched for 12 kilometers through the moon's rocky interior. The engineering challenges had been staggering: maintaining perfect vacuum conditions, generating electromagnetic fields powerful enough to accelerate 10-ton projectiles to impossible velocities, and doing it all while keeping the project hidden from every intelligence agency and corporate spy network in the solar system. "Ma'am, the tungsten rods are loaded and secured in launch position," Harrison reported to Commander Rodriguez via encrypted quantum communication link. His voice echoed in the cavernous chamber, where 50 pristine projectiles waited in their magnetic cradles. Each rod weighs exactly 10 tons, measures 4 meters in length, and has been machined to aerodynamic perfection. "Our calculations show they'll achieve 17 kilometers per second by the time they reach their targets." Harrison paused, running his fingers along the smooth surface of the nearest tungsten rod. "Ma'am, I need you to understand what we're dealing with here. At that velocity, each projectile will carry kinetic energy equivalent to approximately 4 tons of TNT. But unlike explosive weapons, there's no chemical signature, no." She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. "But for 2 centuries, humanity has perfected something they appear to have forgotten: the fundamental art of warfare. We've learned through bitter experience that technological superiority doesn't guarantee victory. Sometimes, The most sophisticated enemy can be defeated by the simplest possible solution. Meanwhile, 400 kilometers above Earth's surface, the alien fleet maintained perfect formation. Ambassador Zethkar stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Dominion's Will, a vessel that stretched nearly 2 kilometers from bow to stern. The ship's organic-looking hull pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, and its multiple weapon arrays could level continents with concentrated plasma bursts. His tactical officer, a six-limbed insectoid creature called Vrex, approached with the latest intelligence reports clutched in his secondary manipulator arms. Vrex had participated in 17 planetary conquests and had never encountered a species that posed even marginal resistance once they understood the futility of their position. Ambassador, Vrex chittered in the harmonic language of his species. Our deep scan analysis of the human industrial installations is complete. Their lunar facility appears to be nothing more than an expanded mining operation, probably excavating rare Earth elements. Their orbital platforms are primitive construction projects, and our sensors confirm their weapons are still based on chemical propulsion and kinetic projectiles. Zethkar's crystalline skin shifted through several hues before settling on pale blue, the color that indicated deep satisfaction among his people. Exactly as our xenobiology team predicted, these humans follow the standard pattern of pre-spaceflight civilizations. They possess creativity and determination, but lack the fundamental understanding of energy manipulation that separates advanced species from planetary primitives. The alien commander moved to his strategic display, where holographic representations of Earth's major population centers rotated slowly. When their ridiculous ultimatum expires, we'll demonstrate hegemony power by eliminating their 3 largest urban areas. The electromagnetic pulse from our plasma cannons will disable their primitive electronics across half their planet. The survivors will understand that resistance is not merely futile, it's suicidal. What neither Zethkar nor any member of his crew understood was that humanity had spent the better part of 4 centuries studying one fundamental principle that transcended all technological advancement. Given sufficient velocity, even the simplest piece of metal becomes a weapon of mass destruction capable of penetrating any known defense. Back in the UN Assembly Hall, Rodriguez checked the countdown timer displayed on her wrist communicator. 6 hours and 17 minutes remained until the hegemony's deadline expired. "6 hours until the galaxy learned never to underestimate human ingenuity." Dr. Harrison's fingers moved across the targeting computer with the precision of a surgeon and the desperation of a man who knew he held humanity's fate in his hands. The Lunar Command Center hummed with barely contained energy as massive capacitors charged to full power, their electromagnetic fields creating subtle distortions in the air that made his teeth ache. The targeting system displayed 50 perfect geometric formations, the alien fleet hanging in Earth's upper atmosphere with the confidence of predators who had never encountered effective prey. Each hegemony vessel maintained exact spacing, their formation so mathematically precise it would have been beautiful if it weren't so arrogant. "Commander, we have achieved target locks on all 50 vessels," Harrison reported, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were about to attempt. "The kinetic bombardment system has been calibrated for maximum penetration effect. All tungsten rods are loaded, magnetic field generators are at 100% efficiency, and the firing sequence is ready for your authorization." Through the quantum communication link, Commander Rodriguez's voice carried a mixture of grim determination and scientific curiosity. "Dr. Harrison, for the record and for posterity, remind me of the physics principles we're about to demonstrate." Harrison activated a holographic display showing the mathematical equations that would either save humanity or serve as their epitaph. "Ma'am, kinetic energy equals 1/2 mass times velocity squared. It's one of the most fundamental principles in classical mechanics, taught to every physics student for the past 3 centuries. Our tungsten rods possess considerable mass, 10 tons each, but it's the velocity component that transforms them from simple projectiles into weapons of unprecedented destructive power." He manipulated the hologram, showing trajectory calculations and energy transfer models. At 17 kilometers per second, each rod will carry kinetic energy equivalent to approximately 4 tons of conventional explosives. But unlike chemical weapons, there's no blast wave, no heat signature, no electromagnetic pulse. Just pure kinetic transfer, momentum and mass converting instantly into devastating mechanical force. 400 kilometers above Earth, the hegemony fleet continued its patient vigil. The bridges of their vessels hummed with the quiet efficiency of superior technology, their crews monitoring primitive human communications with the detached interest of scientists observing laboratory specimens. Ambassador Zethkar received another routine update from his science officer, a serpentine creature whose multiple optical sensors could analyze electromagnetic spectra far beyond human perception. The being's scaled hide shimmered with patterns that indicated cautious confidence in their native visual language. "Ambassador," the science officer reported in perfectly modulated tones, "our deep scan analysis of their lunar installation has revealed increased electromagnetic activity, but our computational models confirm it's consistent with expanded mineral extraction operations. The humans appear to be attempting to mine additional resources, perhaps hoping to trade raw materials for more favorable surrender terms." Zethkar's crystalline skin cycled through subtle hues as he processed this information. Predictable behavior. Most primitive species attempt to gather wealth or resources before accepting client status. Their mining equipment poses no threat to our vessels. Even their most advanced industrial tools operate on principles we mastered millennia ago. What the aliens couldn't detect, despite their sophisticated sensor arrays, was that the electromagnetic signatures they attributed to mining equipment were actually the charging cycles of humanity's most advanced magnetic acceleration system. The hegemony sensors were calibrated to identify energy weapons, plasma generators, and particle beam arrays, not the subtle field fluctuations of kinetic launch systems that had been obsolete in their civilization for thousands of years. On Luna Base, Harrison watched his chronometer count down the final minutes. "Ma'am," he continued, "the beauty of kinetic weapons lies in their fundamental simplicity. No complex energy patterns for their shields to analyze and counter, no exotic particles for their computers to scramble or redirect, no guidance systems to jam, no warheads to defuse remotely. Just mass, velocity, and Sir Isaac Newton's laws of motion. The targeting computer chimed softly, indicating optimal firing position. Earth hung in the targeting display like a blue marble, with the alien fleet positioned in perfect formation between Luna and humanity's homeworld. "Commander Rodriguez," Harrison announced, "all systems show green across the board. The laws of physics are loaded and ready to fire." Rodriguez's response came through clearly. "Dr. Harrison, show these aliens why humanity never abandoned the fundamentals. Fire when ready." Harrison's hand hovered over the firing control, a simple red button that would either announce humanity's arrival as a galactic power or serve as their species' final statement. 2 hours remained until the hegemony's ultimatum expired. 2 hours until the galaxy learned that sometimes the oldest lessons are the most important ones. "1 hour and 13 minutes remained on the hegemony's ultimatum when Commander Rodriguez gave the order that would forever alter humanity's position in the galaxy." Her voice carried across the quantum communication network with the calm authority of someone who had spent decades making life-and-death decisions under impossible pressure. "Dr. Harrison, you are authorized to fire at will. Show them what human ingenuity can accomplish." "Aye, ma'am." Initiating kinetic bombardment sequence. Now, in the depths of Luna Base, Harrison's finger pressed the firing control with ceremonial precision. The magnetic accelerator systems that had taken 37 years to perfect activated simultaneously across 50 launch tubes. Electromagnetic fields stronger than anything ever generated by human technology gripped the tungsten rods and began accelerating them through the 12-kilometer tunnel with mathematical precision. The process was surprisingly quiet. No explosive roar of chemical rockets, no plasma discharge, no energy weapons characteristic whine. Just the subtle hum of magnetic fields manipulating matter according to laws that had governed the universe since its creation. Within 4.7 seconds, 50 tungsten rods had been accelerated to 17 kilometers per second and launched into the void between Luna and Earth. The projectiles were invisible to the naked eye, dark metal against the infinite darkness of space, traveling faster than any human-made object in history. No exhaust trails marked their passage, no energy signatures betrayed their approach. They were simply 10 tons of refined tungsten moving at velocities that transformed them from construction materials into instruments of absolute destruction. Ambassador Zethkar was reviewing the final terms of humanity's surrender when his tactical officer suddenly stiffened, all 6 of his limbs moving in rapid, agitated patterns. "Ambassador, our long-range sensors are detecting unusual kinetic signatures. 50 small objects approaching our fleet at impossible velocity readings." Zethkar's crystalline skin shifted from confident blue to puzzled orange. "Missiles? Torpedoes? Our defensive matrices will neutralize any primitive projectile weapons before they—" "Sir, negative on missiles or guided weapons," the tactical officer interrupted, his voice climbing several octaves in what Zethkar recognized as species-specific panic. "These objects show no energy signatures whatsoever. No guidance systems, no warheads, no propulsion signatures. Our computers classify them as inert metal objects." "Inert metal?" Zethkar's skin cycled through confusion patterns. "What manner of primitive attack involves launching solid metal through space? Do they expect to damage our hulls by throwing rocks at us?" The answer came 37 seconds later when the first tungsten rod struck the Dominion's will amidships at 17 kilometers per second. The hegemony's energy shields, marvels of exotic physics that could deflect plasma streams hot enough to ignite atmospheres, proved utterly useless against simple kinetic force. The tungsten rod passed through the defensive energy matrix as if it didn't exist, its mass and velocity creating a momentum transfer that no known technology could counteract. The projectile punched through the ship's adaptive hull materials, through 17 decks of corridors and compartments, through the vessel's central computer core, through the artificial gravity generators, and out the opposite side of the ship in a perfectly straight line. The kinetic energy transfer was so massive that the Dominion's will didn't explode in the traditional sense. It simply came apart, its molecular bonds unable to cope with the devastating mechanical stress. Atmosphere vented into space in brilliant jets of crystallized gases. Internal bulkheads buckled and collapsed as the ship's structural integrity failed catastrophically. Emergency lighting flickered and died as power conduits were severed. The mighty flagship of the Hegemony fleet broke into 3 large sections and dozens of smaller fragments, each piece tumbling through space in slow, majestic arcs. Across the alien fleet, the same scene played out 49 more times with mechanical precision. Tungsten rods moving at impossible velocities tore through energy shields that had never been designed to stop solid matter traveling at relativistic speeds. Ships that had conquered worlds and subjugated entire species were reduced to expanding clouds of debris in less than a minute. The Hegemony's tactical computers, programmed with the combat experiences of 1,000 conquered civilizations, had no classification for what they were witnessing. Their databases contained detailed analyses of energy weapons, exotic particle beams, antimatter warheads, and gravitational distortion fields. But simple kinetic projectiles moving at extreme velocity. Such primitive weapons belonged in historical archives, not on active battlefields. In the span of 37 seconds, the most advanced fleet in the galaxy's recorded history was reduced to scrap metal and frozen atmosphere. Back on Earth, Rodriguez watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction as 50 red contacts simply disappeared from her screens. Around her, the bridge crew of the UES Defiance sat in stunned silence, hardly believing what they had witnessed. "Sometimes," Rodriguez said quietly, "the old ways are still the best ways." Three alien vessels had survived the kinetic bombardment, not through superior technology or tactical brilliance, but through sheer cosmic fortune. Their positions at the fleet's outer perimeter meant the tungsten rods had only clipped them at oblique angles, causing catastrophic damage but not the complete molecular disintegration that had claimed their sister ships. Ambassador Zethkar found himself trapped in the auxiliary command center of what remained of his flagship, a section that had once been a minor storage bay but now served as the only pressurized compartment still maintaining life support. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows across twisted bulkheads, and the artificial gravity systems failed every few minutes, sending loose debris floating through the cramped space before slamming back down when the generators cycled back online. Around him, the handful of surviving crew members worked with desperate efficiency to restore basic ship functions. Their elegant technology, so superior just hours before, now sparked and malfunctioned in ways their designers had never anticipated. Hull breaches had been sealed with emergency foam, but the ship's structural integrity was compromised beyond any hope of proper repair. How? Zethkar demanded of his science officer, whose serpentine form now bore visible scars from flying debris. How did primitive kinetic weapons penetrate defenses that have withstood plasma bombardments from a dozen different species? Explain to me how simple metal projectiles accomplished what the most advanced energy weapons in the galaxy could not. The science officer's multiple optical sensors flickered as he accessed what remained of the ship's sensor logs. Ambassador, our energy shield matrices are designed to analyze incoming threats in real time, identifying their energy signatures and generating appropriate countermeasures. Plasma streams are dispersed across multiple frequency bands. Particle beams are deflected using gravitational lensing. Even antimatter warheads can be neutralized by destabilizing their containment fields at safe distances. His voice carried a note of something Zethkar had never heard from a hegemony scientist before: genuine bewilderment. But these human projectiles, they carried no energy signatures to analyze, no exotic particles to deflect, no guidance systems to disrupt. They were simply solid matter moving at velocities that our defensive computers classified as impossible for kinetic weapons. The shield generators attempted to process the interaction, but by the time they could formulate a response, The projectiles had already passed through the defensive matrix. Zethkar's crystalline skin cycled through a complex sequence of colors. Deep purple for shock, burning red for anger at his own tactical failures, and finally settling into the pale gray that indicated profound contemplation. In his 63 years of military service and 57 successful planetary conquests, the hegemony had never encountered a species that combined such primitive technology with such devastatingly effective tactical thinking. On Earth, Commander Rodriguez opened a priority communication channel to the surviving alien vessels, her transmission cutting through the electromagnetic interference from the debris field that had once been the galaxy's most advanced fleet. "Ambassador Zethkar," she began, her voice maintaining the same calm professionalism she had displayed throughout the crisis. "I hope you're beginning to understand that primitive and ineffective are not synonymous terms. Sometimes the simplest approach is also the most elegant solution." The alien's image materialized on her main screen, his previous arrogance completely absent. His 4 arms hung limply at his sides, and his crystalline features reflected something Rodriguez recognized from her 2 decades of military service: the hard-earned respect that only comes from being thoroughly outmaneuvered by a superior opponent. "Commander Rodriguez," Zethkar replied, his voice carrying new undertones of genuine respect, "your species has demonstrated capabilities that our strategic assessment teams failed to anticipate. Perhaps I underestimated the ingenuity that emerges from centuries of intraspecies warfare." Rodriguez nodded slowly. "You made the same mistake that many enemies have made throughout human history, Ambassador. You focused on technological sophistication instead of tactical effectiveness. You assumed that advanced meant superior, and that primitive meant vulnerable." Dr. Harrison's voice joined the conversation from Luna Base, where he was already analyzing the debris patterns to better understand alien hull composition. "Ambassador, your energy shields represent remarkable engineering achievements, but kinetic energy follows the same physical laws throughout the universe. We simply applied sufficient velocity to create momentum transfers that exceeded your defensive parameters." Zethkar processed this information with the analytical mind that had made him the hegemony's most successful diplomat. The aliens' entire military doctrine had evolved around energy-based warfare: plasma weapons that could melt continents, particle beams that could disrupt molecular bonds, defensive shields that could redirect stellar-level energy outputs. They had grown so accustomed to fighting civilizations that shared their technological paradigm that they had forgotten the fundamental principles their own ancestors had once employed. "What do you propose now, Commander?" Zethkar asked. Rodriguez's expression softened slightly, but her voice remained firm. "Now we negotiate, Ambassador, but this time we do so as equals." The emergency session of the Hegemony Council convened exactly 72 hours after what their military historians would permanently record as the kinetic incident. Representatives from 47 member species gathered via quantum communication links that stretched across half the galaxy, their holographic forms filling a vast amphitheater that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The assembled delegates represented civilizations that had evolved beyond physical warfare millennia ago, species that had transcended crude matter-based conflicts in favor of elegant energy manipulations and sophisticated technological solutions. Yet today, they found themselves grappling with the impossible reality that their most advanced fleet had been annihilated by weapons their ancestors might have used in the Stone Age. Ambassador Zethkar, broadcasting from his crippled vessel in Earth's orbit, stood before the assembled representatives with his crystalline skin displaying the deep blue hues of profound respect mixed with the silver overtones of hard-earned wisdom. His forearms moved in the formal gestures required for addressing the full council, but his voice carried undertones that few had ever heard from a hegemony military commander, genuine humility. Honored council members, Zethkar began, his words transmitted instantly across interstellar distances. I must formally revise my initial assessment of the human species. They possess capabilities that our xenobiology teams, our strategic analysis divisions, and our military intelligence networks all failed to identify or predict. He paused, allowing his words to resonate through the quantum communication matrix before continuing. These humans have demonstrated something we have not encountered in our expansion across this galactic arm over the past 3 millennia. Tactical creativity born from continuous interspecies warfare spanning their entire evolutionary history. While we perfected energy manipulation and transcended physical conflict, they refined the fundamental principles of applied violence into an art form. Council Prime Nexus, a being of pure consciousness contained within a crystalline matrix that predated most stellar formations, pulsed with skeptical energy patterns that translated as barely contained disbelief. You were defeated by simple kinetic projectiles, Ambassador. Metal rods accelerated through primitive magnetic fields. These are weapons that our civilization abandoned when we first achieved controlled fusion reactions. Zethkar's skin shifted to deeper blue, indicating absolute certainty in his convictions. Yes, Honored Prime, and that abandonment represents a critical flaw in our strategic thinking. We dismissed kinetic weapons because we assumed our energy-based defenses made them obsolete. The humans never made that assumption because they never stopped fighting each other long enough to grow complacent. On Earth, Commander Rodriguez participated in the council session via quantum link from the UN Emergency Assembly Hall, flanked by Dr. Harrison and military representatives from every major nation on the planet. The balance of power in this sector of the galaxy had shifted so dramatically in the past 3 days that even she was still processing the implications. Honored council members, Rodriguez addressed the gathering, her voice carrying easily across interstellar distances. Humanity offers a fundamentally different perspective on warfare, technology, and survival. While your civilizations have achieved remarkable advances in energy manipulation and material science, we've spent our entire history perfecting the practical application of basic physical principles under extreme pressure. Dr. Harrison stepped forward, activating a holographic display that showed the mathematical progression of human weapons development from simple projectiles to magnetic acceleration systems. From slings that launch stones at 30 meters per second to railguns that accelerate tungsten at 17 kilometers per second, humans have never abandoned the fundamental principle that sufficient kinetic energy can overcome any defense. The insectoid representative from the Vrex Collective, whose species had achieved spaceflight through bioengineering rather than mechanical technology, chittered in harmonic frequencies that translated as nervous amusement. Are you suggesting that your entire species has been essentially weaponized by evolutionary pressure? Rodriguez nodded without hesitation. In the most literal sense, yes. We've spent our entire recorded history, and presumably most of our unrecorded history, engaged in increasingly sophisticated forms of organized violence. We've learned to be creative when facing superior opponents, adaptive when our standard approaches fail, and absolutely ruthless when our survival is threatened. She gestured to the holographic display showing Earth's scarred continents, where the evidence of countless wars was still visible from orbit. But more importantly, we've also learned when not to fight, how to recognize worthy opponents, and the value of converting enemies into allies when mutual benefit is possible. Council Prime Nexus pulsed with different energy patterns now, curiosity rather than skepticism. What exactly do you propose, humans? Rodriguez looked directly at the alien consciousness, her expression serious but hopeful. Partnership, Honored Prime. You possess advanced technology, peaceful civilizations, and accumulated wisdom from thousands of years of cooperative development. We possess Zethkar's skin shifted to green, the color indicating agreement and alliance among his people. The humans speak fundamental truth, honored counsel. The galaxy contains regions we have avoided for centuries, hostile forces that our energy weapons cannot effectively engage, and strategic challenges that require approaches we have never developed. Perhaps, Rodriguez concluded, it's time to remember that the most sophisticated solution isn't always the most effective one. 6 months after first contact, the joint human hegemony fleet approached the Void Sector, a region of space that had remained unexplored for over 2 millennia due to the presence of an ancient enemy that defied every conventional military doctrine the galaxy had ever developed. The combined armada consisted of vessels that represented the marriage of 2 completely different philosophical approaches to warfare. Hegemony ships bristling with energy weapons and defensive matrices, accompanied by human vessels whose exterior simplicity concealed the most advanced kinetic weapons systems ever constructed. Commander Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, humanity's newest flagship and a testament to what could be achieved when human tactical thinking merged with alien technological capabilities. The ship's hull incorporated hegemony metamaterials that could absorb and redistribute energy attacks, while its weapon systems represented the ultimate evolution of magnetic acceleration technology. Beside her, Ambassador Zethkar served as both diplomatic liaison and strategic advisor, his crystalline skin displaying the steady blue patterns that indicated focused concentration. "Ma'am, long-range sensors are detecting multiple contacts ahead," reported Lieutenant Thompson, his voice carrying the confidence that came from 6 months of successful joint operations. "Energy signatures are unlike anything in our combined databases. The readings are organic in nature, but artificial in structure." On the main tactical display, the enemy vessels materialized as 3-dimensional representations that seemed to shift and writhe even as they maintained their basic configurations. The ships appeared to be grown rather than built, their hulls covered in what looked like living tissue that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. Even through the sterile medium of electronic sensors, they conveyed an impression of malevolent intelligence. "The Devourers," Zethkar explained, his 4 arms moving in gestures that conveyed both respect and deep concern. "Our ancestors encountered them during the early expansion period, nearly 3,000 years ago. Their biotechnology represents evolution taken to its logical extreme, ships that grow, adapt, and learn from every engagement." Rodriguez studied the tactical data streaming across her displays. "What makes them so dangerous, Ambassador?" "Their bioarmor adapts to energy-based attacks within minutes of first contact," Zethkar replied, his skin shifting to darker hues as he accessed centuries-old military records. "Plasma weapons, particle beams, directed energy systems. Everything the hegemony has developed over millennia becomes ineffective after brief exposure. The bioships literally evolve defensive measures in real time." Dr. Harrison's voice joined the conversation from the fleet's Weapons Coordination Center, where he oversaw the targeting systems for 20 human vessels. "Ma'am, we're looking at approximately 30 Devourer ships in defensive formation around what appears to be a construction facility. Intelligence suggests they're preparing for a major expansion beyond this sector." Rodriguez nodded grimly. "Good thing we're not just bringing energy weapons to this fight." The joint fleet consisted of 50 vessels representing the best tactical thinking from 2 species separated by millions of years of evolutionary development. 30 hegemony ships provided defensive shields, electronic warfare capabilities, and support systems that could sustain prolonged combat operations. 20 human vessels carried the latest generation of kinetic weapons, railguns capable of accelerating depleted uranium projectiles to velocities approaching 25 kilometers per second. Dr. Harrison, status report on all kinetic platforms," Rodriguez commanded. "All systems show green across the board, Commander." Harrison responded with the satisfaction of an engineer whose theoretical work was about to receive its ultimate field test. "The Devourers are about to learn the same lesson that every terrestrial predator learned millions of years ago. Sometimes the hunter becomes the hunted, and evolution doesn't always favor the most sophisticated adaptation." The battle began exactly as hegemony tactical doctrine predicted. Devourer vessels launched coordinated waves of bioenergy attacks that struck the fleet's defensive shields with the fury of stellar storms. The alien bioships immediately began analyzing the energy signatures, their living hulls shifting color and texture as they developed countermeasures against the hegemony's plasma-based weapons systems. Within minutes, the Devourer bioarmor had evolved specific defensive responses to every energy weapon in the combined fleet's arsenal. Plasma bolts were absorbed and redirected, particle beams were dispersed across multiple frequency bands, and even fusion-powered missiles were neutralized by organic countermeasures that seemed to anticipate their detonation patterns. Then the human ships opened fire with their kinetic weapons. Tungsten core-depleted uranium rounds, accelerated to impossible velocities by magnetic fields that could distort local space-time, slammed into the Devourer vessels with the inexorable force of natural law. The bioarmor that could adapt to energy signatures had no evolutionary answer for simple kinetic physics, momentum and mass converting instantly into devastating mechanical destruction. The first Devourer shipmind broadcast its confusion across multiple dimensional frequencies before its vessel was torn apart by a coordinated railgun salvo. Impossible adaptation parameters. Kinetic force vectors cannot be. Evolutionary responses insufficient. Rodriguez keyed her communications to address the entire joint fleet as Devourer ships began exploding in sequence, their adaptive biotechnology utterly incapable of developing defenses against fundamental physics. This is Commander Rodriguez to all vessels. Today we've demonstrated something that transcends species boundaries, that true tactical superiority comes not from abandoning proven methods, but from understanding when and how to apply them most effectively. As the last Devourer construction facility was reduced to organic debris drifting through the void, Zethkar's skin glowed with colors that had never been recorded in hegemony diplomatic archives. Deep respect mixed with profound gratitude. The humans have taught the galaxy an invaluable lesson, he announced to the combined fleet. Advancement and sophistication are not synonymous. Sometimes the most elegant solution is also the most ancient one. In the aftermath of what historians would call the Battle of the Void Sector, human tactical doctrine became mandatory study throughout hegemony space. Military academies that had existed for millennia added courses on applied kinetic theory and primitive weapons in advanced warfare. The galaxy's most sophisticated civilizations rediscovered respect for the fundamental principles they had abandoned in their rush toward technological transcendence. And Earth, the small blue world that had once faced extinction at the hands of galactic civilization, would never again be underestimated by anyone who understood the simple truth that had reshaped the balance of power across the stars. Never underestimate a piece of metal moving at high speed.